this topic is utterly near and dear to my heart. Collaboration is really at the center of almost everything I do, both teaching and research. So I'm only going to talk about a couple examples, but I'm happy to go in different directions. All right. So just for background, I am from Minnesota, the University of St. Thomas, where I wear a couple hats. I am a professor of the School of Engineering in mechanical engineering. I'm a professor in the School of Business in the entrepreneurship department. And then in the School of Education, I co-founded the engineering education program for teachers and teach in their education leadership. So right away, my teaching load is pretty collaborative. This fall, I've got 4 engineering and 1 business. In the spring, I'll have business, engineering, and education classes. So I'm lucky that just day to day, I get to see different fields. I also run something called the Playful Learning Lab, which is my research group. And so my students, my awesome research students, couldn't let me have a boring slide to explain who we are. This lab got its start with something called Squishy Circuits, gosh, over a decade ago. And now it is a research group that consists of about, as of last summer, we had 35 paid research students, all undergraduates from 15 different majors. We're a little smaller these days, but these students come from STEM fields, they come from communication, they come from a lot from business and marketing and finance, and then lots and lots of education students with a emphasis often on elementary ed. So this is where you guys get to participate and unmute a bit. What does it mean to collaborate?
Build on each other's ideas.
Build on each other's ideas. Any other? You can even type if you want. But what does it mean?
That's it. That was the right answer.
Okay, that you win. All good. Other additions to what it means to collaborate?
How about share resources?
Okay, so share resources, work together to achieve a common goal. We heard build off each other's ideas. And then as an engineering professor, why collaborate with other people?
The world is collaboration, really.
Efficiency.
Right?
Okay, we've got efficiency, we've got the world is collaboration. I'll be blunt. I think I'm teaching engineering graphics this semester for the 51st and 52nd and 53rd and 54th time in my career. I collaborate partially so the stuff stays new and fresh to me, and I find it interesting so I can get my students excited, because for any of us that have been teaching for 15 plus years and teaching 4 to 6 sections of the same course every year, it can kind of get boring if you don't pull in your own interest and learn something new. So homework, or not even homework, now work. Jot down on a piece of paper in front of you or your computer a list of at least 3 people, organizations, companies you'd like to collaborate with. So your homework right now, you're dropping down 3 people, organizations, companies you'd like to collaborate with. And here's some constraints you can add to it, because you're allowed to do more than 3. At least 1 should be within your organization, your university or your museum or wherever you work. 1 should be outside of your field and outside of your organization. And the last one should be like a stretch dream collaboration. Like the one you might not even tell anybody else, but secretly you have always wanted to work with this person, organization, company, etc. And then maybe when you've written your list, give me a hi, I've done it. We're going to use this list a little bit later. So let's give you 1 more minute. You can add more. Keep going. I keep a list of 5 on my desk. Okay, so you've got your list. We'll look at this later. I started doing this actually my senior year of college. I was an ocean engineering student for undergrad, and then went to my grad work in robotics, but I was also at night teaching at an art school while I was a graduate student. So I got to collaborate quite a bit. And I started writing this list in pencil on an index card and keeping it in my desk drawer. And as I worked with a company or a person, I'd like erased them and added the next one. And it took me, that original list, to get all 5 of those crossed off, took me until my late 30s. But it's a fascinating thing to kind of keep that dream list near you. And I'll tell you what I do with that list later. Okay, so what does collaboration look like in the engineering world for me? I'm only going to give you guys 3 examples today because this is a collaborative discussion. But just to give you a sneak peek, everything I'm showing you here are my engineering classes. So all of these pictures are engineering courses that I have taught at the University of St. Thomas, where I'm lucky to have colleagues and a dean who let me do somewhat unusual things. And this idea of sort of radical out there collaboration started with this. We're in Minnesota, St. Thomas, not the islands. It gets very cold here in January. And when I first started teaching here, we didn't really have a separate dynamics course for mechanical engineering. It was in other courses, but we had a 4-week January term. And so some students would go to Italy, some students would go to Hawaii for philosophy classes, many students would go home. And I thought, why, of course, what engineering student wouldn't want to give up 4 weeks in -20 temperatures to take a daily class on dynamics and Lagrangian dynamics, right? Dream situation. And you're chuckling. It wouldn't have been a dream situation for me. So I came up with a way, again, to make it interesting for me that then would tie my hobbies to it. And if I could be really enthused, hopefully the students could. And I'm going to stop share for a second to make sure that I was sharing sound. I want to show you what this class ended up looking like. We have a little video, that's 60-second video to show you our ENGR 488 dynamics course.
I think gravity's got me. I think gravity's got me. Oh no, please don't let go. All these restraints and requirements, rigid bodies won't deform till spent. All these things I've said, you know they're true. Am I spinning or is it you? I think gravity's got me. Oh no, please don't let go. I think gravity's got me. Oh no, please don't let go. Like a rocket, potential energy quickly converts to kinetic me.
I love the lyrics.
Star-crossed products meet in reference frames, harmonic motion gain. I think gravity's got me. Oh no, please don't let go. I think gravity's got me. Oh no, please don't let go. Oh no, please don't let go.
So we did the typical day-to-day equations in the classroom portion of this, but then instead of going into the basement and maybe having them swing a pendulum, we swung them on the flying trapeze. Instead of using a spring for harmonic oscillation, I just had them jump off a 40-foot high trapeze wearing bungee cords. I will say that one of the really great things about the last 15 years I've been at UST is I've got a really great relationship with the General Counsel and the Safety Office. And we have lots of check-ins about what I'm thinking of doing and what waivers will be needed before we do the stuff. We can talk about that later as part of collaboration. And yes, so someone asked, is this on campus at UST? You still see my video screen. Oh, yeah, it's okay if you still see my video screen. Here we go. Well, that is a circus school nearby. My husband, who's a native Minnesotan, how he got me to move to Minnesota was he let me know that there were 3 circus schools within an hour of the house he wanted to move to and the school that I could teach at. And so that class, what I really loved about it, honestly, was that the students did the work. They actually said they put in more hours on the class than they were expecting to, but none of them complained and actually asked if they could take it again a second time. They did some great analysis. We had motion sensors, we did video capture, we got to work with our health and human performance department on campus. And it tied in really nicely to the kind of greater format that I use when I'm creating engineering classes. And this isn't a talk about play, but given that I run a lab in the Playful Learning Lab, you probably could guess that is near and dear to how I frame everything I do, from consulting to collaborations to research to teaching. And our model of play within my lab has 4 elements. We look for joy, for whimsy, playing with new people, and surprise. And today our discussion here is all about playing with new people. You guys see my screen, right? Okay, cool. I can never resist my students' animations. So they made a really cool one to we have pop-up books to describe all of our theories of collaboration and play. So new people. And I love this XKCD cartoon that, yes, I have seen. Everyone sends this to me. If you can't see the screen, it says, this is an interdisciplinary program in which physics students try to hit psychology students with pendulums. And the caption is, my professors had an ongoing competition to get the weirdest thing taken seriously under the label interdisciplinary program. I'm pretty sure I could win this contest at most situations. The really cool thing about that is it was a class, that circus class, but if you're curious, like, how does this tie to research? We actually used that class to spin off a small line of research in my research lab, switching circus schools to Twin City Trapeze Center, where we actually have done a lot of motion capture on flying trapeze artists wearing sensors. This is a professional flying trapeze artist wearing a costume we made for her with motion sensors and lights, and we can then look at the track of how she swung. And based on the color you see, it tells us what her motion was, whether she was kicking forward or backward, and how that varies from advanced and novice flyers. So yes, we can get papers out of these crazy collaborations, which is a question that I often get in education college settings. Once you're the professor that takes your students to the circus and works on Play-Doh, you get a lot of really weird emails. And can anyone guess what you're seeing right now, what this picture is?
How many people does it take to change a light bulb?
How many people does it take to change a light bulb? This is actually a session of our engineering design and graphics course, right? Modern dance style. Over on the right, this guy you can just see the back of his hair. He is a choreographer, a French choreographer, Jacques Heim, who runs the Diavolo dance troupe in Los Angeles. And they were partnering with Macalester College, a college without an engineering school that is right down the street from us. And they reached out to me and said, Diavolo's whole thing is that we build these props and we improvise off these props. Could you work with us on this? We heard you do circus stuff. And this seemed like the perfect thing to tie into an engineering class. So this is my homework for my CAD class for freshmen. Every student was challenged of what, if you were given 2 pieces of plywood, what kind of props could you build that dancers could use? And basic SolidWorks, they were learning how to make the parts and make them and fully assemble everything and work within constraints to present it to clients. But they were actually able to get feedback then from the choreographers at Diavolo. And Diavolo then actually picked one of the designs that was built by some of our students on campus. And then this is dancers from our university and the partner college testing them out. And our students got to witness this whole process. The engineering students got to actually, at a freshman level class, talk to these choreographers, talk to the young dancers down the street who they normally wouldn't talk to. And kind of a fun footnote for this was Diavolo loved the finished product so much, it's now an internationally traveling piece of their show. So I know the student whose homework assignment became a piece like this got to bring it to the Ordway, which is one of our huge theaters here. And I think he had a friend with him that night. And that had to be impressive to see the person taking you to the theater being called out by the dancers on stage when you're 20. But this is what his homework turned into in the hands of professional dancers. I'm going to end with one third example. Each of these 3 examples I'm picking for reasons. How many of you are familiar with the rock band OK Go? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I see some yeses. Cool. So OK Go is an American rock band. They make music. Many people know them for their videos. Have any of you ever used any of OK Go's videos in your engineering classes? Anyone? Okay, I got some yeses. So what I love about OK Go's music videos is they have one that's a long chain reaction machine. They have one that took place in a Russian plane flying parabolas. They have one that took place in 4 seconds using projectiles and fast speed cameras, and then they slowed it down. It's an engineering dream. And I had the chance of, I bumped into the guys at a conference a few years ago, and we decided that I gushed a little bit and said, you should do stuff for education. I'm using these for my teachers. And they said, that's great. We don't really have time for that. But teachers email us all the time that they use it. And together we launched something called OK Go Sandbox in 2018. That is a pretty hardcore collaboration. This is the gentleman is OK Go's lead singer. And then these are 2 teachers. One is an education student who's now a 5th grade teacher, and one is a current 5th grade teacher. And we launched OkGo Sandbox, which I will share a different screen, that is OkGo's education, I guess we could say arm, which is, I mean, at one level, it's a website. But if you go to this website and you go to filter resources, you could say you're looking for like engineering content. And what it might bring you is a video on the 1 moment of math. This is actually a phenomenally done video where it explains how the guys used a spreadsheet. We can actually even share the spreadsheet. And you can actually go in and see the spreadsheet that was used for this music video. You can find lesson plans. These are aimed at middle school, typically, elementary through high school, though, hey, some of the concepts are gonna look familiar to us. And all of these videos, there are now 25 that I've executive produced for the band with our team out there. Our engineering students at St. Thomas and my education students and my communication students are the ones creating these education materials. We've even we filmed on St. Thomas's campus, This Too Shall Pass, which is the chain reaction one that many of us have used in classes. We then, with the guys, created short videos on things like how do simple machines work? Oops, let's do simple machines. Sorry, it's a Friday. All right. We have the guys explain simple
All right,
machines.
dudes, I think we
and go through the different simple machines. This is actually filmed at University of St. Thomas. And then you can go through, and this one is turned into a scavenger hunt for kids, where in the video that the band made, do you find these simple machines? And then what standards do these tie to? My team has also gone on tour with the band. We've now done 25 of these. We've done a project where we partner with Blue Origin to challenge kids around the world to design an art experiment that can only happen in space. Because the band cheated, they were just flying parabolas, which you would know if you watched our videos and did the math worksheets. We then were actually able to, of the 28 countries that sent us applications, we were able to pick 2 groups of kids, build their payloads and fly them with Blue Origin. And last spring, we did the largest collaborative project I've ever done. Honestly, I don't think I ever strive to do a bigger collaborative project ever. We invited the world to sign up to color or to send us music clips. And we created 6 music videos for the band that involve 15,000 colored sheets from people around the world, 280 schools, and 5 songs created from music snippets. So really large scale collaboration, and honestly not something I want to make a habit of doing on a regular basis. But COVID called for some pretty elaborate projects and ways to pull people together with art and STEM and STEAM and engineering. And one of the things I'm most proud of that I'll show in this is these, as I say, these really are collaborative projects. What you're seeing here are pictures of some of our filming these are all LA filming. The one in the lower left, we have the band, we have our director, but we also have an engineering student, and we've got a 7th grade teacher. Every time we film, we have teachers on set. Over here to the right is an education major and an engineering major, undergraduate, working with the band's art director to get the props because we were explaining the neuroscience of optical illusions. So, as I said, I want to end up pretty quickly, but some of the takeaways from this. There are 3, in my opinion, there are 3 types of collaboration. One type of collaboration is you have a challenge that they can help solve. The second is they have a challenge that you can help solve. And the third is you and they co-create together from the very beginning. And the 3 examples I picked for you sort of show those, right? AnnMarie wanted to teach a circus dynamics class, and Circus Juventus had coaches in a circus school. Is this truly collaboration? I mean, honestly, these days, I don't think I'd consider it collaboration because I basically hired them as consultants. On the second type, they have a challenge that you can help solve. Diablo and McAllister College needed dance props, and AnnMarie's Engineering 171 class could design them. So they reached out to us. The third type is where you co-create from the very beginning. AnnMarie and OkGo decided to create an education program together. And we spent 1 week just figuring out what the name of it should be. And then what are the limits and what tone do the guys use? And are they avatars for the teacher or for the kids or themselves? There is no decision that gets made for OkGo Sandbox that involves, honestly, probably less than 5 phone calls or texts back and forth between the band, me, and my team. It is truly a co-creating collaboration. So I'm curious, look at your list and just take a minute. What category do those fall into? For you, the dream collaborations that you started your day with, that you started this session with? maybe even mark them. And all of these serve their purpose. But whether it's this type A, this type B, or this type C, does sometimes set the power differential or the relative return on investment. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. So I wanted to pull some of the places that I've collaborated with in the last 10 years. This was kind of fun to make. I never tried to make this grid. Whereas, like, what do the places that we've done like serious projects with in the last 10 years, like what do they have in common? And I would say this is the crew of, like, we've spent countless hours on the phone with these groups or working with them. And for me, they really fell into 6 different areas. And as this is Keen, you know, this is a network, feel free to reach out. I'm not going to go into details on these, but I'm happy to share notes or what we learned. My experience, so to set the lens I look at things, they really fell into 6 categories. Top left, we had museums. I adore museums. Actually, I just spent my day at the Minnesota Children's Museum today, where we're in residency helping design exhibits and also how they design exhibits. On the right are performing arts organizations, mostly. I am passionate about that. I was actually an art and drama major in high school, and in college minored in music composition. I always tell K-12 teachers I'm teaching, it really doesn't matter what you bring into your classrooms as long as you're passionate about it, because it helps to show your students you're passionate. So I tend to gravitate towards the fine arts. Lego Foundation is my closest foundation partner. And honestly, I always love Lego, and they were on that little list of 5 that I stuck in my desk when I started grad school. So it took me, that was the last one to cross off my list. We've worked with kind of other nonprofits, Magic Arms and Maker Ed. I will admit those both were special cases. And sometimes it's harder to work with other nonprofits because they're also desperately fundraising. In the middle, companies we've worked with, I find that they tend to veer towards food. We've worked with cake designers. We've worked with the Alinea Group, which is a Michelin 3-star restaurant in Chicago. We did a project with for a year. And then my passion, I'm currently a student at Gallaudet University in their ASL and deaf culture program. And so I've been working for the last 8 years on STEAM programming for deaf and deafblind children. So that's the last little bucket here that is pretty near and dear to my heart. All of this ties back though to inside my research lab, because we're a large group, we run under 3 rules: be kind, play well with others, and clean up your messes. And these work really well for collaboration. Right, one of the things when I talk about like be kind and play well with others, well, playing well with others, often we're so focused on our students, or I'll speak for myself, in a project that when I partner with an outside partner for a class design project, I have to remember that they're giving me their time. And if my students don't have a product for them at the end, or we don't like put it together in a nice format that they can use, you know, I've taken their time. And I want to be really careful with that. We spend a lot of time about that, playing well with others. Cleaning up your messes, you're going to make mistakes in collaboration. And I spend a lot of time with my students discussing how to have difficult conversations and also how to set mistakes right. Cleaning up your messes sometimes is literal if you work with chefs and rock bands. I know a lot of now, unfortunately, about how to get paints off of the walls and floors of schools. Happy to chat about that offline. Now, as you go forward in these collaborations, the 4 areas that I typically spend time with before I dive into something, particularly if we're going to contract it, is how do you approach and find the collaborators? How do you plan what you're going to do together? Setting really clear goals about what is the end product? You know, who's responsible for what? Which stuff are you doing, or which stuff are your students doing? Because outside organizations might not have experience working with academia, and they think they're working with you. And if they're working with your undergrads, you want to lay that out pretty clearly, because that's a different set of expectations. Step 3 is doing the work. How do you work together? And step 4 is ending the project. You want to think through how it ends. Sometimes collaborations, you don't know how to end them, right? And do you want to be working with these people forever? Maybe. But honestly, I've enjoyed doing short-term projects, but you don't want your partners to think that you're committing forever. So I spent a lot of time thinking through what will the end of this project look like and talking it to before we start. If it's a 1-semester project, that's made clear. If it's hey, I'm going to commit 5 years of my time going to the museum once a week and helping and sitting in your meetings, that's a clear thing. You also want to think through what happens if you and the collaborators don't hit it off as you get into the projects. And so thinking about end stages for collaborations. So the overall things to consider that I always tell my team are do no harm. And we do a worst case scenario list for most projects, where if we're in Zoom, we all turn ourselves to anonymous as our names, that when we write in the chat, You can't see who said what. And we make a list of all the things that could go wrong. Like, what are you scared about? And this is really important when we're doing projects with thousands of people or children or spacecraft. And then we make that list, everyone adds to it. We don't know who put what thing on the list. And then we address every single thing on that list as a group. Collaboration benefits should go both, all ways. Are you getting press for this? Well, you better make sure that your partner is as well. If this is part of your job, you're getting paid for it. But if you're working with artists, they could be really struggling. And every phone call you put them on, if you're not paying them, you're asking a lot. So I spent a lot of time about what are the benefits of this collaboration to you? It shouldn't just go one way. Plan for things to go wrong. That sounds like any engineer, but have an escape plan is something that I've learned now over 15 years of doing this sort of collaboration is, how are we going to facilitate if things go wrong? Or if I decide this isn't working, is this in our contract that either person, if there's a contract, that we can end it? Are we doing check-in meetings with the person? If your collaborators do or say something that is concerning to you, can you have a meeting where you say, if that happens again, the project is over? All right, so I suspect you all have that list of collaborators. And so another lesson I wanted to leave you with was how to seek out collaborators. And 3 of these are points I wanted to make sure I said. One is to go to things outside of your discipline, even if it doesn't seem relevant to what you do in the slightest. Setting aside a couple hours a month to go to a few seminars or watch them online is really, really beneficial. You can't always tell how something's going to be useful. Any of you that teach engineering at a liberal arts school probably spend time telling your students that the core classes aren't just these hoops they have to jump through, that they actually are helpful. This is the practicing what you preach. This is the going and seeing what those look like. If there is a cool seminar in the psychology department on your campus, you might as well go see it once. The second is to ask, what's the worst that can happen? So particularly for your dream collaborations, I've really made I've made a practice of, in December of every year, which might not be the best month to do it, but it seems like a great time to make end of year resolutions. I force myself to write an email to at least one person on my dream out there, I don't know you collaboration list. And this could be a favorite author. This could be a musician. This could be the owner of a restaurant you read about in a magazine. These are all examples from my life. And sometimes they reply and are like, your work seems cool, but not interested. Sometimes they don't reply. I guess that's the worst that can happen. Sometimes they reply and they're like, I really just don't agree with how you're doing your work. For a while, I did a lot of music visualization software, open source with my students. We use it with deaf children. We've used it for performance. And I reached out to my dream composer and he's like, yeah, no, when I write for how people hear it. And if I work with you on the software, that's another composer working, right? The visuals aren't part of my thing. You seem lovely, but no. Okay, I guess that was the worst that could happen. I still go to his concerts. Though sometimes you'll be surprised. I have been very surprised by people being willing to chat. So again, we tell our students to take risks. I challenge you to look at that reach one on your email, reach one on your list that you started the seminar with, and yeah, send an email. The last is be creative in how you meet people. I suspect that based on this talk, many of you assume that I am an extrovert. I am a hardcore introvert who spent 14 years in a theater troupe and learned how to do presentations. I was going to do this presentation from the Children's Museum, but decided I was so nervous I wanted to be at home with my coffee cup. I write a script when I go to conferences. If you go because I used to skip all the parties at conferences, if I go to a conference, some of you have been on the receiving end at the cocktail hour. I walk in, find someone by themselves, force myself to go over and ask them to tell me about what they're excited about. It's because I'm utterly afraid of these social situations. But something I've done that is a bit of a commitment, but you're here on a Friday, so maybe you do commitments. I really wanted to meet new people without leaving my house. I'm a mom of 2. It'd be cool to meet new people and really get to know them, not just a Zoom seminar once. So 8 years ago, a friend did something nice for me and I wanted to repay it. So I decided with another colleague that we'd repay it by starting a gathering. And at first we thought a book club, but then we realized that among our friends, if we did a book club, people would just lie about having read the book and show up anyway. I see some of you nodding, so you know what I mean. Okay, so that wasn't gonna work. So instead, we started what we call Salon, and we invited 10 people. Me and my co-host each invited 4 people that we knew, but decently, but not well, and wanted to know better. And the other person's list, you didn't know at all. And those people made a commitment to meet once a month for an hour and a half on Google Meets at the time. Now we're on Zoom. And to host once over the course of the year. And this only lasts a year. And when it is their time to host, they have to mail a box to everyone in the group. And when you host, maybe we play an escape room, or maybe we eat chocolates, or maybe we sew, or maybe we look at someone's research, or maybe the other people dissect a mouse and then you make a rule in Salon that you can't send dead animals and scalpels. That also happened, no more. We had an editor send us books and we edited together one page because no one's gonna read it in advance. And Salon ended after a year, every year. And then I encourage people to go off and start a new Salon with new people. There's actually a couple of engineering faculty, I think some over here have been in past Salons. And the cool thing about it is it's 90 minutes. Most of us can afford 90 minutes once a month to hang out with other people, but they're not all engineers. So in my current group, we have authors, and we have a television host, and we have a marine biologist, and we've had some ministers, and we've had circus performers, and we've had chefs. And it's amazing what you can learn and how you can think differently, forcing yourself to spend 90 minutes a month with a hand-selected group. This is why you always have a co-lead. And then the last thing is be receptive when people reach out to you. If you want people to say yes when you ask them to collaborate, then you should do the same. And so I have definitely carved out a lot of time to taking those calls when people ask to talk about my work, or going to observe at a school, or trying to connect people to things. Again, play well with others and be kind really are at the heart of a lot of what we do. All right, so I told you that this was going to be, yeah, okay, 30 minutes, that worked. Introducing you to stuff, but then it is now time to chat a bit. And I'm curious, think about a collaboration that you have done, either in your engineering classes or engineering research, and a lesson you learned from it. It could be a small collaboration, it could be a big collaboration, but what is something you collaborated on? Jot it down, who you collaborated with, and what did you learn from it? It can be a practical lesson. I learned that chefs know a lot about smell, and that's really cool if you're working with chemists. And or it can be a personal lesson. I learned that I get really stressed on film sets, and I better have a student who can moderate if I need it. Or maybe it's one you don't want to share, which is I learned that I will never work with this person again. Also a valid learning that we usually keep to ourselves, but whisper to each other. Anyone want to share? What did you write? What's a collaboration you did? Tell us about it.
Well, I've had some students work on some small Department of Defense contracts, and I was always worried that that we were presenting ourselves well and that they were producing meaningful things. And it was a stressful time, I guess I'd have to say. But the students did well. Their projects were well received. So, would you do it again? Yes, but I would not. We did it with 3 projects going at once. I might do it with less than that. Yeah, so it's a great lesson. And I mean, sometimes I teach a lot of design classes, and I've always thought it's funny how we expect student stuff to work at the end if they're doing it for the first time, because the first time you do something, you're learning your own boundaries and your own scope and scale. So I keep a very private notebook of things I've learned about, I can never do this many projects at once, or I can never have these many students, or if this person says this again, we have to have a chat, or if this, and that's my reminder to look at before I start new collaborations of or honestly, sometimes it's, wow, I was a jerk in that situation. I haven't always collaborated phenomenally. And then I have to reflect on that a little bit of why, what happened here? During COVID, we dropped the ball on a collaboration. We didn't deliver the final papers we said we would, frankly, because I was exhausted with 2 kids at home. And I actually met with that person for tea this morning and scoped out a going forward plan. How about someone else who can share a collaboration they did and something they learned?
So I've done several summer camp and reaching out to students to try to embed some engineering and hands-on projects and classes. And the particular aspect is we bring in teachers to spend the time of the program learning, and so that the whole funding model is that we're really training teachers while we're running the summer camps. And so I partner up with some companies, and sometimes the companies at the last minute decide that what you had planned and the tour that you had planned needs to be shifted because something else happens. And so I've learned to always have plan B, a plan C, a plan D. It's been hard even with equipment. So I've definitely become the paranoid extra things in the back, plan extra material, plan extra field trips, just as a backup, because things don't always work out.
Especially when you're depending on people that aren't in your position, right? The company had a totally different value proposition for allowing that tour than you did. And while it might seem like the most important thing to you, we spent a lot of time in our projects looking at like, this feels like the end of the world for you, 20-year-old undergrad leading this project. It's not that they hate you, that they're not answering email. It's that they're an executive at a major company. And so they're not ignoring you. They just have a very different day than you do.
Yeah.
Right. And that comes up a lot.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting. It was interesting that you listed that the different types of collaborations have a different power proposition, or like where you are on the totem pole. And it definitely made me reflect on that. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah, that is something that honestly, it took me a while. A couple of you have joined that really, there are 3 types of partnerships, I think. Oh wait, these are, right? Is it your challenge where you have a problem you want other people to solve? And sometimes we get in the habit of being like, hey, like Brett has the software that needs to solve this problem. Brett, can you run this for me? Did we really collaborate? Like, yeah, on the paper we'll list that, but like, was it really a collaboration? Our dream situations, for me at least, are at the end, this you and they co-create from the beginning. And then it's not, we call them play dates, where you can't go into it knowing what you want to happen at the end. It is truly like, you bring your toys, I'll bring my toys, and let's figure out what we do together. And those are the hardest. And, you know, I purposely put them in this letter. And if you look at the examples I started with today, we often start with, I have this challenge they can help solve. Maybe it's, I want to have my students work with classrooms, so let's find teachers that we can build for. Right. I've done that sort of project a lot. We're going to build little free libraries in Entrepreneurship or ENTR 170. Let's find 5 clients that would like our libraries. They're helping me solve them. We could say it's nice that I'm giving them a little free library. On the other hand, they're helping solve my problem, which is I need places to send these to. That's usually the one many of us, that's the one I started with, was here's my problem, who can help me? Once you do enough of those, then I started getting the, hey, AnnMarie, we have this project. Do you have the way to help us with it? And I really spent probably a couple years in that format in the middle. And now like it's the dream situation where often we can sit down with folks and be like, hey, what could we do together? All right. Questions or things you want to share? This is a discussion. I don't want to monopolize, but I'm happy to talk about any of the things in the presentation or projects.
You know, one thing a colleague of mine did that worked really well as sort of a low-hanging fruit, not finding a rock band to make rock videos with, but she partnered up with our a local childcare center, and we were teaching a solid modeling software, and we had the children be our expert users. So they were interviewed, and then our engineering students in the first year engineering class, you know, rapid prototype, solid modeled, 3D printed little toys, and then got feedback on these toys. And it was, you know, really wonderful to see, you know, these, you know, stoic engineers working with 3- and 4-year-olds and getting feedback from them. So that was not, you know, okay, go trips to Hollywood sort of things. It was just easy, you know, walk down the street to find a childcare center.
Those are the dream ones. And again, I purposely use those 3 examples, not the last example there is a little extreme, let's be honest. You know, the rock band thing is a bit much and it's a lot of work. But it really was a go both ways project. Oh, great question, Maria, as well. We'll do that next. I want to stress that the working with kids thing is amazing. And actually for my engineering design class, surprise is a big part of our work. And you have been to talks on surprise. I always say my favorite surprise is actually this. My students know there's a design project in that class. They don't know what the project is until we launch it. And pre-COVID, usually the launch involves showing up and getting on a school bus. And at least 60% of the time, the school bus was already half full of 4-year-olds because we also worked with a preschool. A little different, we didn't use them as expert users. We usually use them as competitive designers. So this picture set, we were actually designing a new exhibit for a museum. And I did a modified version of my design course for the preschool. And they also, we've done this with playground design, we've done this with library design. Those students, for their fact-finding mission, they went and did their fact-finding at the same time that the college students did, helped each other out, especially my daughter. But I will say something amusing, I won't say embarrassing, amusing about this was when we present for the clients, we would have the preschoolers also present for the clients. They wouldn't have CAD models, they'd have usually like things they build out of cardboard. And I did have one project where the client said, we got more useful ideas out of the 4-year-olds than we did out of your students. And I was like, great, see, value proposition, you got both of them from us. But yes, I am a huge fan of collaborating with preschoolers. They are some of my favorite. Our university closed our daycare center, which makes a ton of sense as the university grows, but it does mean that I no longer share a campus with my favorite collaborators. I spend half of every Wednesday now at a K-12 school for deaf and deafblind children. And man, I learned so much from those kids and their teachers. But yeah, so kids are easy and there are kids. Now, you will want to think through liability. You'll want to think through background checks. Every student in my research lab has a background check when they're hired. We just have to because of the places that we work, but then when we're doing things for classes, that comes in. Maria Isabel, this is a good question we should probably do for everyone. Like, what is the funding model for these collaborations? This is a great question. I suspect we're all thinking it. These projects that you see have ranged from like $50 projects to $750,000 projects. And we have managed to do things cheaply. By just partnering with schools again. If it's that the students, what do they get from it if the preschool is working with us? Well, maybe I volunteer that I'll go and do 3 guest lectures for the preschool class and I'll tailor it to them and they get to then work with us. That works. If they can, we can write a grant. If we're planning in advance, these are typically more for the researchy ones than the class project ones, but we have co-written grants for a lot of this work. We're lucky at our university that we sometimes have funding where we can get like a school bus or something to go on a field trip for a class and bring our partners. But funding, I don't want to monopolize it. How about other people? Where have you looked for funding for collaborations? I've gotten rejected for 5 grants in the last 6 weeks, so I'm a little sad on the funding side. I swing like crazy for grants is part of it. I write to foundations. I've written the $1,000 grants. I've written the $250,000 grants. That is the game we all tend to play. Talking to your university though is often also a great place to start. Actually, we used for the little free library project we did, we used a small Keen grant. Thanks to the way our Keen setup is structured at UST, a couple $100 bought us enough wood and paint and senior student time in the machine shop that we could build those libraries and deliver them.
But you pay your students, right? Your 15 students in the Playful Lab?
Yeah, my research students I pay. And so that is, I write grants. I try to submit at least 1 grant proposal every month. We also sometimes will do work for hire as a lab now that we've gotten a little further. So we do some curriculum design for some artists and other organizations. I would happily, if you ever want to chat about that, I would happily kind of show you our numbers and how we've approached it. Since that's lab based, I can share in the chat if you're curious, just our annual report of the lab. Now, this is less the classroom stuff. I tried to use mostly class examples today. Honestly, for me, the 2 things tend to merge together pretty heavily. As that circus example, it started as a class and then it turned into research. And I'm lucky that I've had a really understanding department chair and dean who seem to understand what it is that I'm trying to do. Other comments, topics, questions? And it's up to you. Oh, go ahead, Matt.
Oh, one thing that I thought, you could answer or others might be able to weigh in on is this idea of individuals within an organization perhaps owning the relationship or having a relationship with another organization that you may not know about. So curious about how you've been successful with other people at your institution so that they know that you have this relationship with a museum or vice versa. Maybe there's someone across campus who has this amazing relationship, but, I guess what's the structure behind making sure people are aware of opportunities like this, even just within your organization? And that can be kind of open to anyone.
Yeah. Does anyone have any? I have an answer. I'd love to hear other people's answers.
I'll chime in here, and actually here, let me turn. Hi, I'm actually here. I'm not just a picture in the background. So I think one of the interesting things has definitely been this idea of who owns it. And we've run into issues where other groups on campus were potentially working with the same organization, and then it became even more complicated. So I think in a way it sort of comes down to who initiates it, and then who's the major stakeholder, like who's the bigger partner, for lack of a better word. So if you're doing service learning and you've got, an introductory class and you've got 20 students going in, you probably don't matter compared to the education program that's going in and working with them every year and has a history of a 10-year relationship. Sometimes there are offices on campus that do facilitate and own those relationships, and I find working with those is challenging. I prefer to have my own personal relationships, but it's also harder to find those and get those up off the ground running.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it is, I go back to that clean up your messes part of our rules, is you're going to screw it up occasionally. And sometimes it's like being ready to apologize. We have a lot of offices on campus that we can work with that facilitate this. We have a Center for the Common Good. We have a Sustainability Center. Honestly, sometimes it depends on the scale of the organization. If it's a small organization, it's pretty easy to ask them, like, hey, who else are you working with? Like, have you ever worked with St. Thomas, or have you ever worked with whatever your school is? A place where this is something to be careful about is funding, right? You don't want to apply for a grant from an organization and find out that your university was already working on a proposal from there. So I will say, since our work tends to be so collaborative, I do spend a lot of time around campus talking to people. In terms of the offices, again, the general counsel, the sponsored research, et cetera. So that's again a part of what I'll do. The other thing is that first thing I listed on the make your dream list was someone in your organization. Actually, I'm kind of lucky. I can see two of my close collaborators on this call, and one of them is Doug Rosalik, who is a music education professor. Right, Doug has opened doors that I wouldn't have had, and hopefully I've opened some doors for him. But through him, I can already kind of find out of oh, who are you working with? Do you know anyone at the school who's working with this? I do a lot of coffee meetings when I start collaborations. But the worst that happens is you have to, and you be ready to apologize. But usually if you reach out to a group or they reach out to you, someone there knows who they're working with. And they might be telling you something if they reach out to you anyway. But that's a great point. I don't have a great answer for that. I would love if someone else does. Any other questions? And I'm happy to answer questions on kind of any of the topics or types of collaborations. Like when I was, something I'd never done but put together for this was that idea of grouping them. Oh, it's really different collaborating with a museum than it is with a school, than it is with a pastry chef. So that was a fascinating revelation for me.
So at any given time, how many collaborations are you running? Is it one of these at a time, or are you working with 4 or 5 at a time?
And again, it depends on what schedule, or what depth we mean for the collaborations. So at any given time, I guess in some ways I'm lucky that this isn't my job description. The Playful Learning Lab is really something that I just sort of run. And I pull a lot of this. It's hard to tell the seams between my classes and this. I've got 5 classes this semester, and I kind of have partnerships for 4 of them. I like juggling things, and this is, again, it depends on your work style. It depends on how many students I have and how much funding we have. If it's a good year and I have 35 paid research students, my undergrads, then we can have 6 or 7 partners at a time. But a big part of that is sharing the burden. I train in students typically younger. So hiring a freshman or sophomore and having them train with juniors and seniors in my lab. The Playful Learning Lab, which actually I do umbrella my teaching into now, I always have a student who is an operations manager who trains with me and learns kind of how to do the communications. And then every partnership has a point person student and then a team that works with them. So I will say right now, I kind of pick and choose from each of these categories. We have a really big partnership with Minnesota Children's Museum. We have a really big partnership with Lego Foundation. we have a really big partnership with Metro Deaf School, and we have a really big partnership with OK Go. So I guess we have 4 really big partnerships. And then we're working with Twin Cities Trapeze, so that was put on hold because it turns out that circus arts are really high contact. So COVID was kind of a bummer for that. And, you know, we're always kind of looking for how to pull these different things together. So I guess for me personally, depending on my teaching, and then our teaching, we tie in here. So we are doing our design project this semester is actually with Metro Deaf School, where I'm helping them do their STEAM curriculum. Our engineering graphics students in our required mechanical CAD class, they are going to be designing, they don't know this yet, but they're going to be designing tactile tools that can be 3D printed for the deaf-blind students at that school. So things like a map of the classroom. Like you can't buy off the shelf a map of Metro Deaf School's preschool classroom. So we need a custom tactile map that a kid can feel. So that's, they kind of pull into each other. I often borrow the Minnesota Children's Museum for my class projects because I'm already there helping out. So that's a very messy answer. There are very few boundaries between my life and my work projects. Cool, and Jennifer made a note for all of us, which if we're working on collaboration to advance entrepreneurial mindset, that we should email her about it. I mean, I honestly also really think that Keynote is a good place to make these connections. I've introduced people to some of my collaborators because they have asked me through the Key Network, like, can you introduce me to this? Or, hey, do you know anyone who's working on this one thing or that thing? And I love that not everyone in the Key Network is an engineering professor, because you may find from the folks that are from different disciplines in Key, they know different contacts. Or they're already working with a partner you want to work with, and maybe you do a collaboration across schools for that. We have not done as much of that. We have not collaborated much with colleges, other colleges, with the exception of that McAllister one in our lab. Cool, and a lot of people are running off because it's the end of the day on a Friday. Jennifer, why don't we can actually wrap this, but like leave it on for a minute on the unrecording and we can just chat like nitty gritty of some collaboration stuff, which sometimes changes the conversation. Yep. Thank you, Jennifer.